You're going to notice this is going to turn from have subdivision history to just clicking Dynamesh, and now that Dynamesh has turned our subdivided object into a bunch of quads and triangles. The good thing is we didn't really lose any detail. We still got our face back here, we still got our octopus arm, and the really cool thing is if I smooth this one out and then I start sculpting again, it works great. All the detail is, this resolution of our geometry is the same as this resolution of our geometry. In fact, if I go back into my move brush here and I just keep moving this around, or maybe, you know what, I'm going to pull out another arm maybe this way. So I'm going to kind of move this out and around and just kind of pull this around. Now if I start sculpting on here, it's going to be like, okay, I'm sculpting nicely, super nice up here, and that's like, oh, it's getting crappier and crappier. Just control drag and that will re-Dynamesh. If you just control drag out in your document here, that's going to re-Dynamesh. You don't have to turn it off and turn it on again. You just have to control drag and it'll re-Dynamesh, and then you can start sculpting right down your object. So any major changes you make on your object with your move brush, if the topology starts getting wacky in here, and again, you can turn on your polyframe, you can kind of see how much it's changing. Control drag, Dynamesh, all of a sudden you have nice even quads, a little bit of triangles, but it's a lot nicer to sculpt on. So if you're doing major changes in here, Dynamesh will certainly be a friend while you work. So let's use Dynamesh in conjunction with another object. I'm going to grab this cylinder here, and this is a primitive cylinder. It's not a Polymesh PM3D cylinder. It's a cylinder 3D, so that means if I try and sculpt on it, it's going to yell at me. But let's go ahead and initialize this a bit. So I'm going to go to initialize here, and we can do an inner radius if we'd like. We can taper the top down to a little bit of more of a cone-like shape, and we can crank down our H divides and our V divides however you'd like. And once you're ready to sculpt on this, we can go up here to make Polymesh 3D. Now, one thing that's important is, let's say I want to start sculpting octopus arms in a radial symmetry, like kind of pouring out of this volcano. If you just start sculpting, and we'll go ahead and do transform, we'll turn on activate symmetry across the Y. We'll do radial count in the Y axis, so we're going along this way here. And we're doing octopus arms, so we'll say the radial count's at 8, and we just start sculpting here. And let's say towards the bottom here, I'm going to hold down shift and snap to the top, and I want to pull out these corners here. This geometry is just too low resolution, and I didn't do it in values of 8, so it's going to be not very pleasant to work with. However, let's say I want this to be really more cylindrical. So if I hit Control D, that's going to kind of average these vertices out as I subdivide. So it gets a nice smooth shape. But let's say I wanted those corners sharper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my cylinder 3D. And again, this is a primitive, so I can go here to initialize and turn my polyframe back on. And I'm going to crank up my H divides and my V divides here. So now that I've done that, I can go make Polymesh 3D. And now when I hit Control D, it's going to have a lot tighter corners there because I've thrown more resolution up there. Now I can go over here to activate symmetry in the Y with a radial count of 8, and now I can start sculpting in my octopus arms, like so. Of course, if I do anything crazy, like I get down here, I'm going to hold down shift to kind of snap to the top here. I'm going to go into my move brush. Actually, you know what? I'm going to rotate to the bottom and then hold down shift, and I'm going to kind of pull out some octopus arms towards the bottom here. And I go back to the top and I want to start sculpting. So up here the resolution will be fine because these are nice even quads. But then here where I'm getting really stretched, nasty geometry, I might want to go in and just turn this into a Dynamesh mesh. So now that I've initialized it and I got these tight corners up here, I can go and convert this now to a Dynamesh like so, just by hitting the Dynamesh button. And now it's a Dynamesh. I can go in here and I can smooth this. And now these are nice and not stretched geometry. So again, just control drag to keep Dynameshing as you go. And we still got that tight lip in there. If you wanted to have more resolution, I can just undo out of that. So now we're back to our subdivision. If we change the resolution to say 256 and enter, and then turn on Dynamesh, what that's going to do is it's going to be more points. So now we have 323 active points. If I undo that and just Dynamesh it at 128, that's 80,000 active points. So it cranks up the resolution quite a bit. If we do 256 and Dynamesh and go into polyframe here, we zoom in, there's a ton of little squares going on. So those are a lot of polygons to make up this mesh. But that means we have more resolution to sculpt more details. So you're going to see we can get very, very fine detail with that much resolution. Depending on what you're making and how you want to work, you can kind of decide if you want to start out with a lower resolution, which I generally do. You can just type in 128, or you don't even have to type in. You can just drag this slider around and just control drag, and that'll Dynamesh it lower. So what I generally do, especially when I'm doing organic stuff, is I'm going to go up here to stroke, turn on my lazy mouse, crank that lazy radius up, and I can say, let's do, I'll keep that top edge sharp just for demonstration purposes, but we'll kind of drag out an arm here, and we'll smooth that. We'll go grab our clay brush, which I have assigned to Alt-C, which we did earlier. So now we can kind of do this. We can go in here with our move brush. We can move these out even further. And once we start getting to a narrow point, and you can control drag to Dynamesh, if you want to inflate these, make them a little bit fatter, here's our inflate brush right here. You can just click that, and now we can just kind of run down the edges here and just kind of inflate those up, make them a little bit fatter. And then, of course, we're control dragging to re-Dynamesh as we go. By default, blur is turned on. If you don't want it to blur your Dynamesh as you work, generally I don't. I'll just make that 0. Project we're not going to get to in this demo right now, but we can touch on that a little bit here. But for now, resolution and Dynamesh is all I'm really concerned about. So now we have a Dynamesh that we're in here sculpting with, and we're not using subdivision history anymore. We're just using Dynamesh, and if we're sculpting out our base mesh here, and it's like, it's looking really good. Now I want to start getting some detail in here, so I'm going to go in with my clay brush and start sculpting in. It's like, that's too jaggy. I need more resolution. At this point, instead of hitting Control D, which you can, if you're done sculpting your base mesh and you want more resolution and you're not going to be doing any wild and wacky stuff, you can hit Control D and then just start sculpting in, and that's more resolution. But you also have the option to go in here and just crank your Dynamesh resolution up and then Control drag, and then it'll go ahead and give you more geometry. And you can do that. So it's kind of up to you. I wouldn't use subdivision history, like I said, if you are going to be making really, really broad changes to your base mesh or to the underlying basic form of your object. If you're pretty much set, feel free to subdivide as much as you want to. But again, the alternative to that would be to just use Dynamesh resolution to get more polygons for more detail.